You're nothing without me, Jolene. His words sliced through me like glass shards, each syllable dripping with disdain. I gazed at Dalton's cold, expressionless face, searching desperately for any sign of the charming man I fell in love with 2 decades ago. But his steel blue eyes held no warmth, only a harsh reminder that the partnership I had built my life around was crumbling before me. I drew a sharp breath as the weight of his dismissal sank into my bones. After years of emotional manipulation, of walking on eggshells and making excuses for his lies, I was determined not to let him have the last word. "Get out," I said, my voice low but firm. Dalton cocked an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "You can't be serious, Jolene." "I mean it," I said. "I want you out of this house tonight." I held his glare, refusing to show weakness, though my hands trembled at my sides. Dalton let out a sharp laugh. "And where would I go? You really think you can just throw me out after everything I've done for you?" He took a menacing step toward me. "You owe me, Jolene. Everything you have is because of me." I flexed my fingers, digging my nails into my palms as I fought to restrain the fury bubbling inside me. He was right about one thing. Everything of material value I owned was because of him, because I had sacrificed my education, my dreams, my very identity to support Dalton's ambitions while he built his empire wheeling and dealing in real estate. I had worked tirelessly behind the scenes, hosting his clients, raising our son, managing his affairs, so Dalton was free to secure bigger deals and reap the fortunes. Only now, standing face to face in our lavish but coldly impersonal house, did I fully grasp how I had squandered decades enabling a man who clearly no longer valued me. "Get out," I repeated through gritted teeth, pointing at the hallway leading to the front door. "I'm done being your dutiful wife. If you won't leave tonight, I will." Dalton's smug expression faltered. He blinked hard before his mouth twisted into a snarl. "What has gotten into you?" He grabbed my shoulders, his fingers biting into my skin. "Is this about that country club receptionist? That little fling meant nothing to me. She was just a warm body when you were too busy or tired or whatever excuse you always have." His callous words sparked an image in my mind. The pretty blonde giggling on Dalton's lap last weekend, her fingers trailing along his chest. Nausea rose in my gut as the reality of his latest infidelity stared me in the face. I wrenched from his grasp, hot tears stinging my eyes. "Just go," I whispered. "Please, Grant deserves better than to have his final years tainted by the unraveling of his only son's marriage." At the mention of his ailing father, Dalton's face softened slightly. He studied me for a long moment before sighing loudly. "Fine, but we are far from over, Jolene," he warned. He brushed past me toward the bedroom, emerging minutes later with an overnight bag. He paused at the front door. "You really think you can make it out there without me?" He shook his head with a sneer. "Mark my words, you'll come crawling back." The door slammed shut behind him with an air of grim finality. I stood rigid, listening to the fading crunch of gravel as Dalton's sleek Mercedes disappeared into the night. In the deafening stillness, I became startlingly aware of my aloneness. I roamed from room to room, engulfed by the gnawing emptiness within me, which slowly solidified into a cold but unyielding determination. Dalton had underestimated me for the final time. Waking abruptly, I was momentarily disoriented by my unfamiliar surroundings. As consciousness settled in, the events of the previous night flooded back. Dalton's callous dismissal, our explosive argument, and his dramatic departure. Sitting up on the plush guest room sofa, where I had collapsed in the early hours, I was greeted by the first rays of dawn seeping through the tall windows, casting a mocking cheerfulness about the room. Swinging my legs over the side, I buried my head in my hands with a groan, grappling with the question of what to do next. My entire adult life had revolved around Dalton, supporting his career, raising our son, managing our social calendar and household affairs. Now, for the first time in decades, I was utterly alone. A wave of melancholy washed over me as I reminisced about simpler times, sharing secret smiles over the bakery counter with the charming business student, who had tirelessly pursued me during my freshman year of college. Dalton had been enchanting in those early days, lavishing me with affectionate gestures and gifts. I was the pride of my small hometown, where the most eligible bachelor chose me. When Dalton proposed just 8 months after we met, I stunned my family by dropping out of school to plan our whirlwind wedding. Caught up in the intoxicating rush of young love, I couldn't fathom denying Dalton anything. However, as Dalton's ambitions swelled, the sweet gestures gradually faded. He criticized my modest career aspirations, convincing me that staying home with future children was paramount. I buried my needs and independence to support his relentless climb up the corporate ladder. Somewhere along the way, amidst the demands of work, parenthood, and societal expectations, we ceased to be partners. Dalton's ego and self-interest consumed us both. Rising slowly from the couch, resigned to face this new and daunting phase of life alone, I began to gather my belongings. My gaze fell upon the antique desk in the corner of the room, another flashy sign of Dalton's growing wealth. On impulse, I pulled open the top drawer, where amidst the clutter of pens and rubber bands, my fingers brushed against a small, unfamiliar box, my heart racing. I retrieved the velvet case and unclasped it with trembling hands. Nestled inside was a gorgeous diamond tennis bracelet, glinting boldly in the morning light. Fresh anger coursed through me as I pictured Dalton fawning over one of his flings with this extravagant gift. It was yet another representation of his selfishness, lavishing treasures on his whims while I made do with the same jewelry he had given me decades ago. My bitterness swelled, usurping the grief that had threatened to overwhelm me. Dalton had smugly declared I couldn't survive without him, convinced I would never walk away from the comfortable life his wealth afforded. Staring down at the diamond bracelet, a bold idea took shape. Dalton wasn't the only one who could play dirty. If he wanted to underestimate me, I would show him just how cunning I could be. Snapping the box closed, I tucked it into my bag with renewed resolve. I had calls to make: an overpriced divorce lawyer, a savvy real estate agent, perhaps even a private investigator. I refused to emerge from this marriage broken and destitute, simply because Dalton assumed that was my only option. For the first time in years, I felt fully in control of my choices. Come what may, I would land on my feet, and karma willing, I would bring Dalton to his knees in the process. My heels clicked purposefully across the marble foyer as I returned home from my legal consultation. Echoes underscoring my determination. The conversation replayed in my mind. With no prenuptial agreement in place, you have considerable leverage in the divorce settlement, my cutthroat lawyer had said, especially given the length of the marriage and assets involved. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile as I set my bag down on the kitchen island, the weight of the unknown tennis bracelet still tucked inside serving as a tangible reminder of Dalton's deception. My plotting was interrupted by footsteps and a shocked gasp behind me. I spun around to find Lucia, our housekeeper, clutching her chest in the kitchen doorway. "Mrs. Harris, you gave me such a fright. I did not expect anyone else to be home," she explained. Lucia had worked for our family for over a decade, her warm and non-judgmental presence a rare constant in recent years. "I'm so sorry, Lucia," I replied. "It's been a difficult couple of days around here, as I'm sure you know." Lucia nodded, her eyes gentle and understanding. "I cannot believe Mr. Harris would do this to you. You have been so good to him through all these years," she said. I sighed, the truth of her words hitting painfully close to home. All those years compromising my needs and dreams to support Dalton's ambitions. What did I have to show for it now? Just yesterday, it seemed I had lost everything. Yet Lucia's compassion and my lawyer's assurances were kindling a small but growing fire inside, steeling me for the fight ahead. "Thank you, Lucia," I said. "Your support means so much to me right now. I wasn't sure I could get through this, but I'm starting to realize. I discovered that I'm a lot stronger than Dalton ever gave me credit for." Just then, the faint sound of the front gate opening drew our attention. Moments later, Dalton strolled casually into the kitchen. Lucia, and I stared at him incredulously. Jolene, there you are. I swung by the office and had a chat with my father, Dalton said breezily, as if nothing were amiss. He convinced me we need to figure this thing out, not toss away 22 years just because you're going through some hormonal mood swing. He glanced at Lucia. Would you mind giving us a few minutes? I stood frozen as Lucia nodded and slipped quietly from the room. Dalton turned to me, his expression softening. Come now, Joe. I know things got a little heated the other night. He reached for my hand. We're under a lot of pressure. What with father's illness, Alex graduating, and work being more demanding than ever. When I still didn't respond, he gently grabbed my shoulders. I forgive you for your little outburst, all right? Why don't we take a weekend trip to the vineyard? Just the two of us, reconnect, and hit the reset button. My blood boiled at his audacity to waltz back in here expecting reconciliation after everything he had put me through. I wrenched from his grasp, my voice dripping with venom. You arrogant bastard, get out before I have you thrown out. Dalton blinked in surprise. Jolene, please, just listen, he began, but I cut him off. No, you listen. I saw the bracelet, Dalton. His face paled. Our marriage is over. So be yourself a favor and leave with whatever shred of dignity you have left, instead of making this uglier than it needs to be. Dalton's shell-shocked expression shifted to cold rage. He stepped forward, jabbing his finger toward me as he spat his reply. You'll regret this, Jolene. I promise you that. I awoke the next morning feeling truly rested for the first time in recent memory. Dalton's latest attempt to manipulate me had only affirmed I was on the right path. I stretched lazily, surprised to realize I had slept through the night without aid of my usual sleeping pills. Throwing back the covers, I headed for the shower with fresh resolve, the conversation with my lawyer replaying in my mind. Document everything from this point forward. Every financial record you can get your hands on, any evidence of affairs. It will only strengthen your position. By the time I finished blow-drying my hair, I was brimming with purpose. I quickly dressed and headed straight for Dalton's home office. If he thought he could intimidate me into staying with veiled threats, he had another thing coming. I took control of my future as I rifled through Dalton's meticulously organized drawers and files, my hands expertly guiding me to the most relevant documents. Bank statements, investment reports, loan applications. I assembled anything that provided transparency into our financial lives. Anything I could leverage to ensure I emerged from this divorce securely on my own 2 feet. Nearly 2 hours passed in a blur before I heard movements elsewhere in the house. I scrambled to return the home office to its original pristine condition just as Lucia appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Harris, pardon the interruption, but your lawyer is on the phone, she said tentatively. My heart leaped with renewed motivation. Snatching up my stuffed briefcase, I squeezed Lucia's shoulder appreciatively as I hurried past. Lou, you're a gem. Wish me luck, I called over my shoulder. Safely sequestered in my makeshift bedroom suite, I eagerly accepted the call. My lawyer's smooth voice greeted me on the other end of the line. Jolene, I have an update. My investigator uncovered something rather interesting. What followed was perhaps the final missing piece of the puzzle. In addition to evidence corroborating Dalton's long-term affair with his assistant, my lawyer had discovered questionable activity around my husband's latest real estate project. It appears Dalton and his business partner may be intentionally devaluing the property on paper while projecting high future returns to investors, he explained. It's not definitive fraud yet, but it's ethically questionable at minimum. I shook my head in disgust as I realized I had only scratched the surface of Dalton's deceit. After profusely thanking my lawyer for the update, I hung up the phone feeling more empowered than ever. I now held the keys for my liberation from Dalton's toxic web in every sense, emotionally, financially, socially. Emboldened by this newfound evidence, I found myself actually hoping Dalton would try confronting me again. I would relish seeing the smug smile wiped clean off his face when he realized I now held all the cards. The fantasy faded as unwelcome sadness momentarily softened my resolve. Somewhere under the arrogance and duplicity lurked the man who had once made me feel cherished. I said a silent goodbye to that Dalton, the one who existed before success corrupted him completely. With peace in my heart, I tucked away the memory of him for good, along with any lingering doubts about my path forward. This was my life now, and I refused to let anyone control my fate ever again. I stared in disbelief at the documents spread across the desk before me. Financial statements, private emails, company memos, all pointing to the same devastating truth. Dalton had lied. My husband was facing bankruptcy and hadn't bothered to give me even the slightest warning. I sank back in the leather desk chair, my heart pounding as the reality of my predicament sunk in. All those years sacrificing for Dalton's ambitions, and now there was apparently nothing left to show for it. Even the lavish house I sat in was headed for foreclosure. Hot tears stung my eyes. How could I have been so stupid and naive? Of course, Dalton would find new ways to deceive me right up until the bitter end. My sadness quickly hardened into rage as I considered how easily Dalton could have hidden assets or squirreled away funds, anticipating our divorce. I rifled through the papers again, seeking clues, but found nothing concrete. My phone buzzed loudly, jolting me from my frantic research. I glanced at the caller ID, my lawyer. Taking a deep breath to steady my voice, I answered. "Jolene, I'm so sorry about this news," came the somber greeting. "Dalton has kept his financial struggles painfully quiet, it seems, but there may still be options." "Don't apologize," I interjected firmly. "You've given me a gift with the truth. No matter what Dalton tries now, he can't manipulate me anymore." I meant every word with clarity, with conviction. I refused to cower and panic in reaction to Dalton's lies. Not this time. After discussing strategy with my lawyer, renewed courage and conviction propelled me upwards. I gathered my paperwork, adjusted my dress, and strode purposely from the empty house without a backward glance. I arrived unannounced at Dalton's sleek downtown office. His receptionist gawked as I flew past her desk and barged straight through the imposing double doors. "Jolene, what are you?" Dalton sputtered, rising from behind his glass and steel executive desk. Before he could react further, I slapped down the stack of financial documents in front of him. "Game over, Dalton. I know everything," I announced. His confident expression wavered slightly. I pressed my momentary advantage. "I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow. Given your situation, I expect you to be reasonable in the settlement." Dalton opened his mouth to protest, but I silenced him with one final blow. "And if you fight me, I won't hesitate to share every sordid detail with the board, your investors, our entire social circle." My voice rang with conviction. "My lawyer seems confident that exposing your dirty laundry would rather undermine your attempts to save face and salvage your precious reputation, bankruptcy notwithstanding." Dalton pid, sinking slowly back into his seat in tacit acceptance. His eyes narrowed, but his voice held a note of defeat when he finally replied, "You don't have to threaten me, Jolene. Despite what you may think, I have no intention of leaving you destitute." I nodded curtly, maintaining my defensive facade despite the tempest of emotion swirling inside me. I turned on my heels without another word, refusing to let Dalton see me crumble yet again. Safely outside, I sucked in ragged gulps of air, willing my thundering heart to quiet and the sting of tears to abate. So this was it, the demise of the future. I had staked everything on straightening my back. I began the long walk back to grab my things from the house I could no longer call home. Yet amidst the uncertainty now before me, each step fueled a growing flicker of hope inside my heart. I was finally taking back control of my life, and God help anyone who tried to stand in my way. I took a deep, steadying breath as I prepared to sign the final divorce decree. After weeks of tense negotiations, we had finally reached an agreement. I would retain ownership of our main residence and receive a sizable portion of marital assets. Dalton would keep his summer beach house and the remaining investments. Just sign the damn thing so we can end this charade of a marriage once and for all. Dalton grumbled, shoving the paperwork toward me. I picked up my pen, hesitating even now. Parting ways with Dalton for good unleashed a swirling vortex of emotions I thought I had neatly compartmentalized. Sensing my reluctance, Dalton seized the opportunity to twist the knife one final time. Having second thoughts about throwing away your cushy future as Mrs. Dalton Harris? Not so easy to give up the private jets and beachside villas for a life of mediocrity, is it? His smug expression fueled my mounting anger, vanquishing any last shred of sadness. I met his contemptuous gaze head-on. Quite the contrary, Dalton, I replied evenly. I discovered recently that I have assets of my own. His eyes narrowed at my cryptic response. I continued, remember that lakeside property I inherited from my grandmother years ago? The one you insisted I sell right away so you could fund your newest development. Dalton shifted uncomfortably at the long-forgotten memory. After ignoring his demands to liquidate the modest land asset, I had tucked away the property deed, retaining my small connection to family history. Well, it turns out that land is now prime real estate worth nearly $2 million, I revealed casually. So you see, I'll manage just fine on my own. Dalton's face morphed from confusion to disbelief to outrage in quick succession. He sputtered indignantly, "What? You can't prove." "No matter." I cut off his rambling threats with a wave of my hand. "Don't waste your time or money, Dalton. The property is solely in my name. But by all means, take me to court if you need yet another public humiliation." I signed the divorce decree with flourish and pushed it back across the table, relishing this final victory. For a brief moment, I allowed smug satisfaction to replace the swirling emotions I had bottled up for too long. I stood calmly, gathering my belongings while Dalton stared at me wildly, the new reality settling over him. "Well, if we're quite finished here, gentlemen, I'll be on my way." I nodded graciously at our lawyers before turning my gaze back to Dalton. "I do hope you find some shred of human decency left in that dark heart of yours, for your sake at least, if not anyone else's." With those final words, I walked steadily from the room, only allowing myself to tremble with release once outside the oppressive atmosphere. I leaned against the cool brick wall, taking deep, healing breaths. The time had come to close this painful chapter for good and step wholly into a future of my own making. While Dalton grappled with his bitter comeuppance, I felt only lightness and liberty. Tomorrow would mark the first sunrise of a life no longer confined by secrets, manipulation, or the suffocation of stunted dreams. Against all odds, I had salvaged my sense of self from the ruins of betrayal, and nothing could dampen my spirit now. I heaved a satisfied sigh, admiring my surroundings. The blank walls and bare floors held only possibility, a far cry from the cold opulence of the home. The past few months had flown by in a flurry of fresh starts, new ventures, and overdue reckonings. The sale of my inherited lakefront property had left me with newfound financial independence. After the divorce, Dalton descended swiftly into disgrace as details of his shady business dealings came to light. Meanwhile, I embraced solitude and reveled in personal growth. Now, on the eve before opening day of my very own bakery, I paused to reflect on the circuitous route that had delivered me here. Failures often plant the seeds of later success, I mused, and what felt like loss and devastation ultimately cleared the way for truer fulfillment. My philosophical rumination ended abruptly with Lucia's signature cheerful greeting. "It smells heavenly in here already," she remarked. My longtime friend and confidant had left Dalton's employment to join me in this new endeavor. Her steadfast support through all my tribulations had been a rare gift. We spent the afternoon preparing a test batch of goodies showcasing my decadent family recipes. Tomorrow, these polished granite countertops would display baskets brimming with flaky croissants, glossy fruit tarts, and artisan breads. As we worked, laughing easily together, my phone buzzed loudly in my pocket. I dusted the flour from my hands before glancing at the caller ID. an international number I didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of me. Hello, Jolene Harris speaking. I answered briskly, prepared to terminate yet another sales solicitation. But the smooth, familiar voice I heard instead jolted me completely. Jolene, it's Dalton. I'm sorry for the out-of-the-blue call, he said, sounding uncharacteristically hesitant and deflated. Curiosity rooted me in place. I just heard about your new bakery on social media. Congratulations. His voice trailed off awkwardly. Anyway, the reason I'm calling. I know my apology likely means nothing at this point, but I wanted to express my sincere regret for how everything unfolded. I stood frozen in stunned silence, trying to process Dalton's words as he continued haltingly. Leaving you and losing the publicity battle afterwards, it finally knocked some sense into me. I discovered who my true supporters were. Lucia and I exchanged stunned looks. Was Dalton Harris actually demonstrating humility? When I still didn't respond, Dalton pressed on. I ended up relocating abroad to escape the drama and scrutiny. I have an opportunity to start fresh here. But before I did, I needed to make amends, to let you know how much I respect and admire you for landing on your feet. You didn't deserve how I treated you. I cleared my throat, regathering my wits after Dalton's emotional appeal. I appreciate you saying all of that, Dalton. I can't erase the pain you caused, but healing comes from moving forward with wisdom and grace. We exchanged a few more awkward pleasantries before hanging up. As I slowly set down the phone, Lucia appeared by my side, concern crinkling her warm eyes. Are you all right, dear? She asked. Considering the question, I took full stock of my emotional state. To my pleasant surprise, instead of the usual hurt and frustration Dalton's presence evoked, I felt only forgiveness and peace. His mistakes were no longer mine to carry. Meeting Lucia's caring gaze, I gave her a genuine smile. Actually, yes, I'm more than all right. For the first time in ages, I feel completely free, I said. She squeezed my hand supportively, a look of pride and joy lighting her face. Together, we turned our focus back to preparing for tomorrow's grand opening. With clarity and purpose, I stepped wholly into the life and dreams I had deferred for too long.